He looks like he's ready to play a gig, though. Look at him.
Yeah, he's all smooth.
That's when showered Drew right there, guys. Take it in.
Shower.
Take it in. Shirt on.
Shirt on. The hunters are outside shooting, so I don't want to be out there. It's a brisk 30-degree morning, though. So.
Yeah, it's like 33 here. I woke up and my house was like 58 degrees inside.
Oh, man.
So add that to the list, Ryan.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, Bert, you've just got all the old man complaints today.
I really do. Get off my lawn.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I'd rather wake up it be that than to wake up to 98 degrees because, God, they sucked.
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say I'd rather have heat, but not that kind of heat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Nick Lachey, come on. Hey, do you want to do this so that Drew can get out of here?
No, I'm not in that much of a hurry. That's why I scrambled this morning.
What time do you need? What time? What's your absolute stop?
10 to 11.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a hurry.
Well,
let's get into it then, shall we?
Okay, let's do this. 100.
I'm Bert.
I'm Drew.
I'm Ron.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the 100 Albums Podcast, where we discuss the ins, the outs, and the absurdities of a poster that depicts 100 seemingly random albums. I scream. You scream. We all scream for Primal Scream.
Wow.
Today's episode is about Screamadelica. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who aren't familiar, or if this is your first time, we're happy you're here. We're going through 100 albums that appear on a poster that Drew got a couple of years ago. We first went through the project by listening to and reviewing 2 albums a week for 1 year and sharing our thoughts and reactions with each other via video chat. Once we were done, we thought that it might be a fun project to turn into a podcast, and so we're at the number 14th album on the list, Screamadelica by Primal Scream. Vibe check, fellas. First impressions. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Kind of
Ron just had the slow exhale.
I would say perplexing would be my overall feeling.
I agree with that.
That's not necessarily as negative. I will tell you on a re-listen, my opinion is not as negative as our first one.
I'm the same way, Ryan.
But I am still confused.
Yeah.
And I am also the same way, Ryan.
I have complete lack of interest in this record.
Well, looking forward to hearing a lot from you then.
Yeah.
It meanders, and I keep waiting for the point. And it's unlike the last album we talked about, with Dolly, which was very succinct. This album to me was not.
Yeah, the songs are way too. That was one of my notes that came up like 3 times. These songs are way too long for the content that they offer.
So yeah, I mean, if we're contrasting those 2 albums already, I mean they're not on the same shelf, right? But
they're not on the same fucking planet.
They are not. I mean, Dolly's record from the last episode, for those of you who didn't listen, it comes in at 22 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
This album on its release is a double album. It's
No way.
Oh yeah, it's
I guess it would be. Oh my.
4 sides. 4 sides.
Oh jeez.
I bet it probably fit on one CD though.
Contributing to the shortage of vinyl. Little did they know, years later.
I will tell you, this is going to surprise, I think, you guys a little bit. I don't hate this album.
It's fair.
There are some things on here that are, I think, very redeemable. And on my second, and third listens of it, I really started to hear a lot of things that became popular years later all sort of happened here first. Yeah. And so there's something to credit there. But I guess we'll get to that in a little bit. Bert, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of this album?
Why, sure, Ryan. Thank you. Primal Scream, Scottish rock band, originally formed in 1982 in Glasgow. They are Bobby Gillespie on vocals, Jim Beatty on guitar, Andrew Innes on guitar, Simon Butler on bass, and Darren Mooney on drums. The lead singer, Bobby Gillespie, was formerly the drummer of The Jesus and Mary Chain. And he left that band to pursue Primal Scream full-time. Primal Scream were a key part of the mid-1980s indie pop scene, but they eventually moved away from a more jangly pop sound, taking on more of the psychedelic, like this record, basically. The psychedelic garage rock influence, incorporating dance music, breakbeats, DJ influences for this particular album. They were first introduced to the acid house scene in 1988. The band at the time met up with DJ Andrew Weatherall at a rave, and they gave him a copy of I'm Losing More Than I'll Ever Have, which was a track from their debut album, Primal Scream. And they gave it to him to remix for one of his shows. Weatherall added a drum loop from an Italian bootleg mix of Edie Brickell's What I Am, and a sample of Bobby Gillespie singing a line from Robert Johnson's Terraplane Blues, and the central introductory sample from the Peter Fonda B movie, The Wild Angels.
Huh.
So follow me.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot going on there. The line in The Wild Angels is, we want to be free to do what we want to do. The resulting track was Loaded, which then was on this record and became the band's first major hit. Screamadelica is the third studio album by Primal Scream. It was released on September 23rd, 1991 in the United Kingdom and on October 8th, 1991 in the United States. Production team of Jimmy Miller, not Jimmy Walker. Dynamite! Jimmy Miller and DJ Andrew Weatherall. For context, Jimmy Miller had produced records for Traffic, The Rolling Stones, Blind Faith, Ginger Baker's Air Force, a couple of Rolling Stones records here, Cracker, Trapeze, Motorhead, and of course Primal Scream. The DJ, Andrew Weatherall, he had worked with New Order, Bjork, My Bloody Valentine, and Moby. So you can definitely see where that's definitely an influence over here, and you combine it with some of the other stuff that's going on. And Hugo Nicholson, who was the engineer on the record, he's worked with Julian Cope, Bjork, Radiohead. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. I think on the production aspect of things, a lot of different influences.
Who did you say worked with the Stones?
That would have been Jimmy Miller,
the producer.
Yes,
that'll become important later.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
So this album marked a significant departure from the band's, as I mentioned, their early kind of indie rock pop sound, drawing inspiration from house music and, frankly, drugs like LSD and MDMA. Scott Plagenhoff in Pitchfork wrote, live playing meets process music, and all that mattered was what came out of the speakers, a buoyant blend of the immediacy of 60s, 70s psych and rock with the texture and elasticity of acid house, dub, and deep house. In an interview with The Face podcast, Bobby Gillespie said, quote, well, it was a convergence of the times. We were like a rock and roll band, but we had quite diverse taste for a rock band at that time. We liked free jazz. We liked funk. We liked soul. We liked country. We liked blues. We liked electronic music. We liked post-punk. We liked ambient music. We liked a lot. All sorts of fucking weird shit. And then the house thing happened, and we were going to clubs. We weren't going to music gigs because we never liked any of the rock bands in 88 and 89. It was just rock music was fucking dead. I don't care what anyone says, it was dead. That's why in the 80s, 84, 83, we started listening to psychedelic music from the 60s. Rock music in the 80s, it was dead. It didn't exist. It existed, but it wasn't rock and roll. It was not challenging anymore. He talks a lot.
Yeah.
Just for the record, I found a lot of quotes from
That's
him.
a lot of a lot of relation to the music then as well.
Yeah, and that's the guy that wrote this music? Okay.
Yeah. And then the last thing I've got from him was an interview in The Guardian in 2010. Quote, I honestly felt we were redeeming rock and roll. I know it sounds ridiculous, right? But my attitude was that rock and roll should be a celebratory, euphoric, ecstatic experience, high energy, Ramalama. He actually said Ramalama.
Okay.
I felt that rock had become too inward and it was maybe a bit too serious. I felt that what we were doing at that point was what rock and roll should be, except it was modern, it was futuristic. So I think the takeaway from me was they were trying to, I'm not going to get to, that's my hot take. I'm not going to get there yet. Last bit, chart placement when it was released was number 8 on the UK albums chart. It never charted to my research that I could find on US Billboard charts. And the album has sold 715,000 copies as of September 2020. Well, there you go.
In the production credits there, and I'm not surprised you didn't find it because I had to work really hard. There's someone on this album that they don't list in the credits who really deserved a lot of credit, and that was the saxophone player. He's not in the liner notes. He's not on. I had to do some deep diving to find this guy.
That was quite a solo. Who was it?
His name was Stuart Dace. He goes by an artist name of Lodeca, and he's still out recording today. And he's on several tracks, including one of my favorite tracks, which is only 2 on the album. And I can't believe they didn't credit him because that solo he takes on "I'm Coming Down" is amazing.
Yeah.
It's album saving, an album saving moment. Maybe that's why they didn't credit him.
Yeah, that was he was doing so much in that solo. I'm like, who is this and what is this? I'm so glad you brought that up because that closed some loose ends for me.
So that's what I've got for my research. Ryan, do you have other stuff, or guys, do you have anything else to add to it?
No, bring it on, Ryan. Change my mind.
I'm not going to
Can I
change.
just give a quick hot take?
Absolutely.
I'll
let you jump the line.
Well, yeah, and then
Do it, Fonzie.
because I definitely don't hate this record. It's not a matter of hate, but I can't, like I was talking about connections, and I'm not really connecting with it. But my take on this record was, and I may be wrong in the time of it all, but I feel like these guys took George Michael's Freedom 90 and wanted to make an entire movement out of that one song. And that's all I could think about the whole
Interesting.
time. So, I couldn't get past that. And, sure, there's a lot of fun in it. It's lightweight. I got to be less serious all the time. I always tell myself that, but I'm not sure if I pick up his claims of rock and roll is dead and we are reviving it with this record. But,
I think that's the hubris of an indie rock. I couldn't find quotes from any other member of the band. I'll put it that way.
okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think this guy was type A and whatever. So
And
it's
he was probably talking to his local newspaper.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think that's interesting the way you described that, though, Drew. That it's kind of like I think you said like a happy or like a kind of upbeat or whatever. And I didn't get that vibe at all from the second half of the album. The first half, or like the first 7 tracks, up through Loaded, but then Damaged, I'm Coming Down, Higher Than the Sun, and Shine Like Stars. Some of those were like a slog for me to get through because there was a darkness to it or just a different feel. So that's my kind of first thought. I will say just really quickly that I was nowhere near anything Primal Scream was doing at this time.
No,
I'd never heard of them until I was, an adult. And even then it was like, oh yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with this band that, kind of had some indie kind of influences in the late 80s, early 90s.
I mean, I think my overall impression of this album, and I actually, because I knew so little about this band, I went ahead and listened to an album before this, and then an album much later than this, just so I could kind of get a feel for what is it, you know what I mean? And Bert, you kind of talked about it a little bit. Their earlier stuff, this is 100% a departure for them.
Yeah.
It's not like it was kind of bridging to get here.
So which, just out of curiosity, which albums did you listen to, Ryan?
I listened to the self-titled album. I don't know if I have to look up what the name was.
Sonic Flower Groove?
I listened to one that came out like in 2017, I think, as well.
Chaosmosis?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't really strike a whole lot of chord with me, obviously.
Yeah.
But
so what did those albums sound like?
the later ones sound kind of like this, but with more modern technology. And the other ones just kind of sound like, I don't know, it's kind of like a lazier pop sound, almost shoegazy. But what I feel like this album did because we've already looked at other albums from this exact time period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this opens the door for such a huge influx of like popular electronica, if you will, outside of just being in the dance hall, a pop music with an electronica influence, which was not really happening yet, right? Like, you have these catchy beats, really easy to understand harmonies. It's very welcoming in that way. It has kind of like a jam band psych thing, which obviously you mentioned I didn't know that they were focused on listening to music of the 60s psychedelica, but it makes sense.
I saw an article with Gillespie and some of the influences. I wish I'd bookmarked it or something. He goes through like 13 albums that are like huge influence to him. And some of it was kind of that 60s, kind of acid rock, whatever you want to call it, the drug influence kind of stuff. But he drops Maggot Brain by Funkadelic, and he drops, I forget which, it was a Sly and the Family Stone record, some of their later stuff. So he's not lying when he's talking about, what's that?
The Buzzcocks. I saw an interview where he talks about them.
So I think that, he's not lying when he's talking about they were listening to everything. I think Miles Davis had a name drop in there too, but I think that, there's a lot going on. So sorry, go ahead, Ryan. I interrupted.
And perhaps maybe too much in the soup,
Certainly.
I agree with that.
But, in this album, I mean, I hear what will later become Oasis, what will later become Moby, what will later become Beck.
Dude, you're killing me. You're just killing my hot take. No, I'm kidding. No, I had the exact same thing. I had Rolling Stones, and Ron kind of teased it earlier. There's definitely a Rolling Stones sound here.
I mean, Sympathy for the Devil is basically the first song.
Right. And without this, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the New Radicals.
Yep.
But this leads, you can draw a straight line from Rolling Stones through Primal Scream into the New Radicals, particularly in Moving On Up and Loaded, the I think more popular or radio friendly type of tracks. But that the chunking piano over a breakbeat, that's Moby.
Yep.
So that, that's or even some Fatboy Slim kind of
I agree
in there too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Moving On Up actually has a sample, although it's a little bit transmogrified, if you will, of a song that I like a lot more than that song. But it's interesting. I don't know how much you guys listen to Can, but their album Monster Movie, the sample that's kind of driving the bass underneath Moving On Up is from You Do Right.
Yeah.
Which has been sampled by tons of people, by the way. But
for the
obviously,
record,
go ahead.
Ryan.
I was going to say they did obviously very well with that song on this one. So
yeah. For the record, I prefer Curtis Mayfield's Moving On Up to this Moving On Up. Putting that out there.
I think Moving On Up is actually pretty listenable.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Oh,
I just prefer the Curtis Mayfield song, not version, because it's not the same song. But no, I think, and I kind of alluded to it, like the first half of the record for me it isn't bad. I would say all the way down to Loaded, and then once you get past Loaded, then I start to lose interest. I start to lose focus on it. So
I do have a question though. When you guys listen to this album, one thing that kind of bothered me was the use of samples that didn't repeat or weren't thematic to the song. I really wanted to sit down with this album and I didn't have time, but just to mark out the samples in the songs to see if they repeated, kind of like do a linear graph of it. It just, you would hear a really cool sound and not hear it again. And it was just, there was so much going on that I couldn't follow it. And so did you guys pick up on that at all?
A little, I mean, but I feel like there's a lot of it just having fun with technology that I think is happening there more than like you're saying, it's not maybe so much of a thoughtful planning approach. And a lot of that read to me like a less catchy version of like Delight. You know what I mean? Like, and drugs.
Yeah. I think that's a great description though, Ryan, is a less catchy version of Delight, because I think Delight, and now his name escapes me, but basically formed around a DJ. And this is also kind of this DJ kind of house influence.
You don't remember his name?
The DJ in Delight?
DJ Soul is on a roll. I've been told he can't be
is that his name? I thought his name was something different. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'll edit this out. So, that's
no, you're keeping that in.
I'm keeping it in.
Brian's saying it. It's staying in.
Okay, fair. But I think that this album, and if you've ever listened to Delight's other stuff other than Groove Is in the Heart, I think there's some experimentation going on. To your point, Ryan, there's a lot. Hey, I'm going to mess with these sounds and whatever. And Ron, again, back to your kind of original question, it's not something that it's a hook. It's not something that appears in kind of in a loop or whatever. And yeah, that's a little odd given the way that sampling winds up going in future, in other artists and other music.
And that's great. From a pre-production jam, getting ideas together. It's like if this album was a demo and then they actually went on to trim it down and make songs out of it, it would be a better album. Like this is the pre-production,
Yeah.
Well, and
this is the test run.
Right.
To Ron's point too, I think some of the times the samples work against the music. Like Loaded, which was a hit, the samples talking about, no, I want to be free, I want to be wild, right? And then it's like this weird, like the end chorus of Hey Jude for 7 minutes. I mean, it never really gets wild or it doesn't get loaded per se, But
yeah, and I mean, I'm all about, let's be creative and throw everything out the window, but there needs to be something said. Like a song has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has some kind of format to it, and this to me just doesn't, and it ruins the listenability.
Well, and I think here we need to talk about music as function. Okay, so I mean, a lot of disco music weren't necessarily good songs. They had a purpose of people dancing, and that this is a history, of course, that goes back to just when music for the first time, right? But so listening to this music and looking at first songs is maybe not the right context, because this is club music or doing drugs music. And that's its purpose. You're going to zone out to this thing. You're not going to look for beginning, middles, and ends, perhaps.
So are you talking more like program music? Like shit where you just put it in the background and just kind of,
well, I mean,
it's secondary.
Or it just helps enhance the activity.
Gotcha.
So I picture the scene from The Matrix where Neo is at his like green screen computer before he's in the Matrix, and he's like coding, and you hear in the background, and it's just kind of this repetitive, monotonous, to your kind of comment there, Ron, background music, right? He's working, so he just needs something that kind of has a beat and a pulse, as opposed to something that has more of a format and is trying to say something musically or whatever.
Right.
And I'm not bagging on like drum and bass kind of stuff, because I do like that kind of music in certain doses as well. But I think that's kind of what, if I'm understanding you correctly, Ron, that's kind of what you're saying here about some of these songs, is that there's not a lot of meat.
Yeah.
No.
And Bert, it's interesting that you went to Matrix, because I actually had a movie vision with this album too, but it was more Angelina Jolie in Hackers on her rollerblades.
Okay.
When they're all at that rollerblade bar. It was like
I've got
90s.
one too. I've got one too. I said
Train Spotting as well.
You stole it.
I said chunking piano over the breakbeat has a certain, quote, European setting in an action adjacent movie vibe. So I'm thinking like The Bourne Identity or something like that. And that's where I referenced kind of the Moby influence or whatever, because that's what I'm picturing, is somebody's racing through the streets, the narrow streets of a nondescript European city. And this is the music that's kind of playing in the background. So
let's just point out that Trainspotting has one of the most amazing soundtracks in history, and this should by no means replace a wonderful work of art.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So want to talk about the music?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, what's good?
Moving on Up is good. I really do think so. I actually I would listen to that again on purpose.
Same.
It's a little long, but that's okay. Most of my music
you're
is
coming off of
long-winded.
Jolene though, which everything was like a minute and a half. So give it some grace.
It's got some interesting layers that actually do work really well together. And again, I feel like if you were to tell me what year that came out, I would guess wrong by almost a decade because of what happens, I think, as a result of this, that song. But most of it is a little flat. I agree. I actually really liked I'm Coming Down, which I alluded to earlier. I'm not sure why it's on this album. It's kind of a weird track, very experimental, and that sax solo is all over the place. It's interesting they have a sax player on that, but like on Come Together, they have those bad keyboard samples for brass instruments. So like, where did they put their budget for musicians? I couldn't always.
Well, my hunch is they didn't have much of a budget, because I in some of the research I saw that they were, they were working in a studio that was basically being closed or had been closed, and they like were sleeping in sleeping bags on the floor and doing drugs and up at like 4:00 in the morning making music and stuff. So I don't think there was much of a budget. I'm not sure what it looked like, but yeah.
Obviously, this isn't something that is maybe like in our collections, right? And I wonder, because we've been talking a lot about drugs with this episode, and obviously the play on the title, Screamadelica, they're talking about psychedelica. Yeah. I'm wondering how much of that is just that we're not in that time of our lives right now.
Yeah.
And there was a time where, I didn't do super heavy drugs. Listeners, don't worry about me. I'm okay. But,
the Purple People Eater.
Had this album come out in conjunction with a period in my life where I was experimenting with more things like that, I wonder if it would have hit differently. Whereas now, it being both dated and also kind of involved with a lifestyle that I'm no longer,
Yeah.
I don't think I was ever this far down the pipe as this album would imply. But, there's some context there, I think,
Yeah.
for why
That is a great theoretical question that I didn't think of listening to this. If in my college years and the younger years, if I would have listened to this album, what would I have thought of it? And man, there's a good chance I would have thought this was really, really good. And not to say that it's not appreciable now, but that is a great question because, man, there was some shit through that time that I thought was great because of certain things I was doing. And now I listen to it and I'm like, yeah, that don't have the same impact it used to. Or it has the same impact because it takes me to that place. So that, I think that's a great point. I really do.
Same. Yeah. I think that, we had talked about in previous episodes how, the mood that you're in when you're listening to a certain album can really influence what you think of said album. I think, Ryan, to your point, the phase of life that you're in can also influence what you think is good, what you think is bad, what you think is ugly or whatever. So I got a couple of quotes here that I found in the research that it's funny because we talk about kind of good, bad. I think you can talk about the diversity of the influences, the diversity of this album contained in itself as both good and bad, I think. So Pitchfork in 2016, looking back on this record, said, Primal Scream's output has sometimes been dismissed as record collection rock. Their versatility no more than a procession of learned poses. The Byrds, rave, krautrock, post-punk. But Gillespie's approach is less bandwagon jumping and more a kind of aesthetic cosplay, where his fanish intensity of identification works to overcome the limitations of technique. The come-down blues of Damaged is Screamadelica's weakest song, but Gillespie's conviction makes it essential to the record.
Huh.
So that's the good. I think that's complimentary.
That is.
It's a really good description too. The Chicago Tribune, in a review that came out in '91, said Primal Scream is so varied and derivative that you'll wonder if your CD player has gone into random shuffle mode on a late night history of rock send for. Screamadelica gets its contemporary alternative rock licks in from time to time, but the album's most modern quality is revealed when it's appropriated, mix and match reconceptualization of what has already been done.
All right, there's going to be a big spoiler alert here to our listeners. Bert, when we get to Billy Joel, I want you to pull both those quotes out.
Okay.
I'll save them in my docs.
Yeah. and make sure you say Chicago again. I like that's a kind of a cute nickname for Chicago.
Did I say Chicago? Chicago?
Yeah, but that's all right. I like it.
Chicago
I thought he was
Tribune.
talking about mushrooms again.
Oh,
Chicago Tribune. Yeah.
You brought up Damaged, by the way. If you were just to listen to that song, did anyone else? I wrote down, am I listening to Oasis?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And so Oasis, though, I would argue their big influence clearly was the Beatles and kind of rock. Right? Shocker, I know. But so the question is that influence of the Beatles in their more psychedelic kind of phase what influenced Primal Scream? And then the collaboration of those two put together, then you put that on Oasis. I don't know. I mean, Oasis was very shortly after Primal Scream here, so it's not like it was like years went by. Yeah.
But doing the research, Primal Scream also referenced the Beach Boys.
Yes.
And my inner Ryan's voice, which is a bad thing to have some days, was just like, what the fuck? and so Ryan, I literally put this on my notes. Please walk us through how you feel Primal Scream can be compared to the Beach Boys.
Pet Sounds.
Exactly.
I think you have to say Pet Sounds specifically.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think Smiley Smile would be a better reference.
Gillespie talks about the influence of Pet Sounds.
Yeah, because because he wants to put himself on the shoulders of giants.
Oh, yes.
Ooh,
yeah.
Nice.
And while we're talking about the music, what did you guys think of his voice?
I don't like it. It's
we talk about this a lot, like the narrator, the person you're trusted to lead you through this experience.
Yeah. So I think that, Ryan, you did this. You went back and listened to previous albums. I think it was better suited for those previous albums because it was more of a indie pop kind of vibe. Whereas here, on a couple of the Moving On Up and Loaded and some of the more pop friendly, radio friendly type of cuts, I think it works well. But I think when you get into the more out there, I hesitate to use the term experimental, but the stuff that's not necessarily radio friendly, then it's tougher to listen to for me.
There are people who have bad voices who use them well. Joe Cocker, Chris Robinson, Janis Joplin, Otis Redding don't have the best
Tiny
voices,
Tim.
right? Oh God. But they use them well. This is not the case for me with this guy.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not my jam either. I wanted to, because like even Moving On Up, which I really do like. The only nice thing I can really say about his performance on it is his Mick Jaggerisms, and I don't think that's a tribute to him. That's a tribute to what, honestly, this could have very well been me. I'm going to put it out there because I listened to way too much stuff. And if I tried to put all that into one stew, it would probably be this weird thing that nobody, even myself, could understand either. Yeah. And then I would just talk about all my great influences and hope people cared.
Well, so, and I'm going to, in my notes here, under the good, I'm going to quote you, Ryan Oldham.
Ooh.
We talked about Joshua Tree. Quote, Ryan Oldham. It wasn't new wavy. It wasn't hair metal. It wasn't pop per se. It was something else. I appreciate that they were working on that plane, offering something else. And so that's, that resonated with me from the Joshua Tree episode. And I would apply that comment here. I appreciate that they are trying to do something a little bit different. It wasn't, what was formulaic in 1991 and that kind of thing, right? Although I would also, I'm not going to, I keep almost going to my hot take. I'm not doing my hot take, but so I do appreciate that they were, and Gillespie talks about it, how, rock was dead and it was bullshit and we're trying to, no, okay. Yeah, that's performative. But in the actual music, they did try to do something a little different and a little bit out in left field.
I agree.
For my ear. So there you go, Ryan. I'm quoting you
that's
as a way
awkward,
to make an argument for.
Well, I'm sure we all have some hot takes, but real quick here, I want to break for our advertisement.
Perfect timing. Perfect
timing. Kind of a special one. We actually did not get an advertisement this week, but we did get kind of a bit of an announcement, and I think it's important. So if you'll allow.
Absolutely. Public service announcement. Let's hear it.
Yes. Well, it's actually from one of our major sponsors. So
okay.
Anyway, they've been good to us. So I promised them I'd read it on the air. So this is actually from the Christian Brothers Theater. Thank you to everyone that purchased tickets for the new show, Tony Danza's Taxi, A Circus on Ice. However, the show has been postponed indefinitely after an incident on opening night. About 15 minutes into the production, guests began leaving the show. In fact, everyone left. We thought perhaps that our show, of which we firmly believe to be one of the best in the country, was not up to the expectations of our audience. However, we discovered, after the lights went up, that all of our theater seats had been sabotaged with Rod Stillman's turntable needles. Of course, this caused great discomfort to our guests and also ruined our historic century-old seating. Ticket purchases will be refunded. We have a lot of repairs to make, but we hope to continue our tradition of excellence in theater soon. And to the George and George Theater, we see you.
Boy, that's ominous.
I think it's maybe a little slanderous, but I had to read it. I mean, they've been a major supporter of the podcast, so I don't know if George and George knows anything about this.
Yeah,
but,
and if they did, would they admit to it?
The person, I think the real victim here is Rod Stillman.
I know, right? He's his product is being weaponized. It sounds like.
Oh no! Oh, they're turning tables. It's just not one they needed.
Turning seats.
And and what about poor Tony? I mean, he put in so much work.
Well, I was afraid that it was going to be some incident happened that hurt the performers. So I'm glad to hear that they're okay. But Circus on Ice sounds dangerous. Okay. We wish all the best to the Christian Brothers Theater in lovely Branson, Missouri. So we talked about what was good. What about bad? What do you guys think could have been done better or is ugly?
Yeah, I feel like we covered a lot of that too.
Yeah. I
You think so?
will I will tell an embarrassing story on myself. So when we started with the poster and we had to listen to this album, I was like, Primal Scream, have I ever heard of them? I think I may have owned an album, back in the day because I had a whole bunch of just, duplicated cassettes from friends and shit. It was a wonderful time. And so I went through their discography and I'm like, damn it, I know they did this song. I know they did this song. And I'm looking at album cover art, for all their discography. And I'm like, son of a bitch, maybe it's just I can't find it. And only to figure out that I was looking for the Soup Dragons.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Poison.
No. No, I will admit I owned those too. But I was kind of let down because I really liked the Soup Dragons and I had forgot about it. It's just not my jam. I will give them credit for having good influences. But Ryan, I think you summed it up the best, that if you were to try to put all your musical knowledge, if we were to all do that, it would be incomprehensible. And I think they stretched, they tried, but it's just to my ear, just not, it didn't hit, didn't resonate. And
I want to say, and this is partially my hot take, so I apologize. I'm
That's okay.
Fonzieing as
We can
well.
move into hot takes too. That's fine.
But I think this band's marketing is off. And I think we all felt that. I admit, when we listened to this for the first time on the poster, I had never heard of the band and I had never heard of the album. So I see Primal Scream and Screamadelica. And that is not what I'm getting. I mean, the Delica is on this.
Mm-hmm. In spades.
And if they were going to go this direction going forward, I just feel like they could have changed their band name. Because you don't go shopping for Primal Scream in the late 80s, early 90s and put this on. There's nothing screamy happening here.
I'm glad you said that, Ryan, because when this album was on the poster, I had a vague awareness of a band called Primal Scream. And I just assumed that this was going to be thrash metal. It was going to be something that was like way to the right of Metallica and Megadeth and some of the, more mainstream metal. And it was going to be more like, Danzig or something, Anthrax or whatever. And you're absolutely right. That could not be further from the truth, right?
No.
There's nothing screamy about this.
Well, but at the same time, Tears for Fears had that song Shout. And that's kind of where I went to. It was like, Primal Scream's a therapy thing. So, someone's going to be talking, going down that line. And
Primal, scream it all out.
But
These are
also
the things you should scream about.
Oh, bird. Is there anything primal about it either? Like, it's not like there's so much that's actually artificial.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if they were using like, wood blocks for percussive instruments, stuff that's more natural or primal. Yeah.
Okay, so we need to hear this album
together
with primitive technology as close as we can.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess that's my hot take. It's just that it doesn't match up for me.
Mm-mm.
Ron, do you have any hot takes while we're on it?
Not really, other than the fact that I thought Primal Scream and the Soup Dragons were the same fucking band.
Well, my hot take was, so this is happening right as grunge is spooling up, right? Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and those acts. And so it's more of a hot question than a hot take, but without that, had grunge never exploded, is this the direction that rock music alternative would have gone in the 90s? A bunch of soundscape-esque, drug-influenced kind of artists. It's just a thought experiment, right? Because as we've talked about, there are other artists from this era that are kind of similar vibes, the Mobies and those kinds of things, and got popular, had mainstream success. So I guess my question is, if without grunge, would this have been the direction that alternative rock would have gone in.
I think you have to reword that question. What all did grunge kill? Because it killed glam metal,
hair metal. Yeah.
yeah. So it killed a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it, thankfully. So I definitely think there would have been a lot more of this. There would have been a lot more of other stuff as well.
Yeah.
I think these are, even though they classified themselves as working in the rock genre, I feel like this is far enough away from that epicenter to really have been affected by grunge, if I'm being honest.
Ooh, okay.
There was a lot of other popular dance music that was entering the scene that was completely unfazed by grunge. Because if you were to go see this band live, which they do perform live, I watched some videos on the Tube of You. And I think I even sent you guys some of their MTV videos.
Yeah, you did.
But you wouldn't put these on the same bill as a rock concert.
Oh no.
You know, so I don't think there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah.
Not to destroy your question and call it completely useless and a waste of our time. I'm certainly not implying that.
It's the fever. I've got a fever. It just was an interesting thought that I'd had is like, okay, well, you know, given this a similar parallel timeline here, while these guys are gaining their popularity and doing some of this album in particular, that there was the advent and meteoric rise of grunge music. So, yeah. So, context. The album is their third of 11 albums, but there's a 12th one currently in production. So they're still making records. Is this the pinnacle? Is this the top of the mountain for them? Given all the reading I did, it indicates that this album is peak commercially and artistically, because all of the positive reviews say, oh my gosh, this is like a once in a lifetime. You know, people reference this album as a touchstone moment in this genre of music, whatever this genre of music is. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, in my little listening experiment, I can see why this one gets the notoriety it did. But again, I'm not a Primal Scream aficionado, so I will leave that to the numbers to tell me yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same as Ryan. I can make assumptions, but would have to rely on the data because I don't know.
And I'm also not willing to find out. I mean, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. If going backward here, if you could remove one song from this record to make it better, what would it be?
Oh, man. I can't even answer that one.
I can. I actually, because I was really terrified that we'd have very little to talk about on this album because of our personal tastes. So I actually did a track by track opinionated thing here. And if I'm looking at it, it looks to me like Higher Than the Sun, a dub symphony in 2 parts, had my lowest score. And I stand by that. That's a waste of time track.
That is also what I had. So we're of the same mind. I also put or Everything After Loaded.
There you go.
Which I know is not one song, but whatever.
I'd get rid of Loaded too.
Oh yeah,
I would. I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
Well, what annoyed me was the first one. Damn it, Ryan! It was your 2 favorite ones.
Moving on up. And...
Yeah.
I'm coming down.
Because they were because they borrowed so heavily from the Stones, I immediately didn't like them because it was like, man, Stones are like my second favorite band. So that annoyed me so much.
So is what annoys you, Ron? Is it do you feel like it's less an influence and more a kind of copycat?
Yeah, it's way too close. It's way too close in feeling, in chords, the use of the background singers. I mean, just so much of it. It's just like, oh, that's so derivative. But you didn't use it well. I mean, if they would have used it better, there's lots of bands that have ripped off the Stones fully.
Yeah.
Black Crowes come to mind immediately, but they used the influence well. These guys have great influences. They've listened to really quality shit, but did they use it well?
Well, maybe they wanted to, but they didn't have the Stones to do it.
Oh, I should have hung out with Dolly Parton.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Okay. Results and ratings, individual scores. I gave it a 2.5. Drew gave it a 2. Ryan gave it a 2.
I'd be right there.
You'd be right in that neighborhood too.
Oh,
Ryan,
hell yeah.
It sounds to me, Ryan, like you would up that a little bit though.
No, I liked it more.
Yeah.
But I still would
You
probably
stand by the two.
Yeah,
No,
he
that's
liked
fine,
it more, but he wouldn't raise it up a damn
Yeah.
bit.
No, I appreciate more of it. But again, appreciating for its historical context versus
Yeah.
what I listen to it are different.
Mhm.
That's the same reason I don't listen to Beethoven.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another topic, though.
So the average then was a 2.17. Out of 100 albums, this one ranks 97.5 because of our ranking system. So it's near the bottom. And then Ryan, theme restaurant question time. If there was like in the case of Margaritaville, we've been asking this question of our listeners. If Primal Scream had a restaurant, what would the theme be? What would the name be? And would you eat there?
I almost feel like this would be like an opium den.
Well, so I mean, I did the whole I scream, you scream, we all scream for Primal Scream. So it could be an ice cream shop where they sprinkle acid on top of your cone or whatever. But I had written it's a sandwich shop called Higher Than the Bun.
It would be a fusion restaurant.
A fusion restaurant
where
there you
they
go.
where they used everything the wrong way. Like they would deconstruct tomato soup, and it would just be horrible.
Certainly, there's going to be a lot of toppings.
Yeah.
This is going to be loaded with toppings.
So my second runner-up was loaded (baked potato).
There you go.
But I liked Higher Than the Bun better. Okay. Hey guys, always a good time. Really love it.
Hey, what are we listening to next, Bert?
Hey, join us next week when we travel down Thunder Road to Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. Until then, keep on listening and tell a friend, tell a family member. Have a great week.
And don't forget to support our very big fundraiser for the hot air balloon to fly over Drew's house.
That's right.
With a turkey cutlet on it.
That's right. The big turkey cutlet balloon. So, all right, friends, have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
See ya.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we did recording it. Got some thoughts? Connect with us and tell us what you think about the poster, about the albums, or about the podcast in general. Write to us at 100albums@bertislo.com. That's 100albums@bertislo.com. Drop us a follow on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.